For input, guests will be getting back to you on this. The opening ceremony of the summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation has started in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping will deliver a speech at Great Hall of the People, and CGTN will keep you updated on that. So, Ms. Ryder, you were talking about financing?
Yeah, so with the financing, certainly I think it's a relationship which has been mutually beneficial. And I think African governments, although, yes, we still need to be very careful about managing our debt, we're still looking to China, we're still looking to other partners to continue to provide more cheaper long-term patient capital, and especially for infrastructure. Infrastructure is a bedrock over an economy. You can't have trade without good logistics. You can't have good logistics without good infrastructure. And the key gap, especially, again, going back to Agenda 2063 and going back to the African Continental Free Trade Area, is building regional connectivity. Landlocked countries, there's so many of them, but we do want to open up the possibility of trade with those countries. There is some trade, but it's often very, very expensive because of the poor logistics. So how do you get projects across different countries? That's something that China's been increasingly interested into, but we hope that that will be even more of a focus going forwards.
Yeah, I
yes,
follow up on this. Actually, I published a paper a few years ago in a very prestigious journal, World Economy, exactly talking about this issue. If you look at the trade pattern in Africa, overwhelming majority is actually trade between Africa and other countries outside of Africa. The intra-Africa trade is really lacking. There could be more and more opportunities in that area. And the problem is exactly as you said, is the infrastructure, the connectivity infrastructure within Africa, between countries on African continent. That's a very important point, I think.
So in your paper, have you done any calculations on the potential if this intra-continental trade is unlocked?
Well, actually, we didn't do that. What we did in that paper is to look at the what we call the soft infrastructure. In other words, it's not just roads and railways. It's also about the customs clearing facilities, the other things going with the trade, what we call soft infrastructure. So our paper looks into that. Actually, I have a co-author from one of the co-authors from Kenya, one of the co-authors from Mauritius. So they collected the data, looking into this country, into these issues, and I think it adds value. It sheds some light about the potential of intra-Africa trade. For something, like the problem is that in many African countries, it's kind of small, and they don't have the scale of manufacturing, typically associated with a much larger market. And a way to get around this is the regional free trade agreements among countries. I think in East
It's
Africa,
a crucial part of the Vision 2063, right?
Yeah, in East Africa, there's a treaty.
Yeah, we already have some quite strong regional trade blocs. The East African Community, we've got the COMESA, and those are already in place. And as I was saying, the African Continental Free Trade Area is now covering the entire continent, and it is the largest free trade area in terms of numbers of countries. So it's a major development. And in fact, we've had some Chinese companies who produce goods in one country who have benefited already by using the protocols in the AFCFTA. So this is something that, again, it makes the AFCFTA makes the African continent a more attractive destination for manufacturing and for selling for products, selling products as well. But at the same time, we still need to make that the logistics even better so that it takes even less time to move across the continent.
Indeed, and that sort of continental arrangement is very conducive to the localization of Chinese investment and enterprises there, because it's now official. Chinese government has been encouraging Chinese enterprises doing business in China to be more localized, right, Professor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one great potential of growth area. And I just let me give you an example. One of my students went back to his country and gets into the tile business, right?
You mean in Africa?
In Africa, of course,
Right.
yeah. South of Kenya, actually. The issue is that, to me, I had a casual conversation with him one time. I said, look, it just doesn't make sense to import a lot of tiles from China. They're very, very heavy, right? And the transportation costs compared with the value of the tiles in container is very large.
Yeah.
And ask him, why can't they build a tile factory in your country? Now, the problem is that the market is kind of small, and usually a tile factory needs some scale, and they can't sell these tiles. So I think the opportunities of cross-border trade among this country and neighboring countries will really enlarge the market and make the venture like this more viable.
Yeah. Talking
Yes.
of tiles made me think of cement. We just recently published a report looking at kind of Africa-China cooperation within 2023, just that year. And one of the interesting aspects of it, we have a table of all of the new investments from Chinese firms in African countries, and one of the key areas has been in cement factories.
Yeah, right.
Both in terms of, obviously there are certain methods in China and certain kind of technologies in China that can be used to also produce cement even cheaper and in more efficient
And due
ways.
to the
which have
unique
gone
character
over
of this very product, right? It has to be relatively closer to the construction site, and it has a relatively much shorter expiration date. Right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And also because infrastructure and logistics is going to be
lot of
real
cement.
estate, etc. There's going to be a great business in that. So, these companies are kind of taking the first mover advantage in a sense and expanding the possibilities with foreign direct investment on the continent.
Well, guests, we'll be getting back to you on this, bringing you the latest on the FOCAC summit in Beijing. The opening ceremony of the summit has now started at Great Hall of the People in Beijing, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is delivering a keynote speech at the opening ceremony. Our reporter Zhao Yunfei brings us the latest from the media center.
The 2024 summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, or FOCAC, has convened in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping is attending the opening ceremony. Chinese officials say President Xi's keynote speech is expected to draw a new blueprint for the development of China-Africa relations and lead the way forward for the Global South. About 3,000 people are attending the opening ceremony. On Wednesday evening, President Xi hosted a welcome banquet for the leaders of FOCAC's African members and representatives from different regional and international organizations. At the banquet, Chinese President Xi said China and Africa have a combined population of 2.8 billion people. He said China and Africa should work together to achieve modernization and make greater contributions to building a community with a shared future for mankind. FOCAC consists of China and 53 African nations, along with the African Union, and is the cornerstone of ties between the developing countries. Chinese officials say the Belt and Road Initiative is on the agenda at this year's gathering. Since 2013, when President Xi first proposed the Belt and Road Initiative, China has built more than 6,000 kilometers of railway, 6,000 kilometers of highway, and nearly 20 ports in Africa. As the initiative entered its second decade, Beijing advocated small and beauty, or small and smart projects, advancing cooperation from major infrastructure to sustainable development plans. Currently, 52 African countries and the African Union have signed a memorandum of understanding with China on jointly building the Belt and Road Initiative. When it comes to cooperation, China says it follows the principle of sincerity and pursues the greater good and shared interests. It's been a tradition lasting 34 years for the Chinese foreign minister to pay a visit to Africa at the beginning of each year. The close ties between China and African nations are the backbone of multiple development strategies, including the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Beijing.
The African Union is the most representative and internationally influential body in Africa. It was the first regional international organization to sign a Belt and Road Cooperation Agreement with China, and the AU Commission is a member of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. To find out how China-Africa relations have developed, my colleague Wang Mangmang spoke to the AU's permanent representative to China, Rahmat Allah Muhammad Osman.
Ambassador Osman, pleasure to have you.
It's also my pleasure.
We know that the FOCAC meets every 3 years and is going to be held in Beijing this time around. Share with us your expectations of the forum this time, and could it channel some more consensus in China and African countries to address some of the challenges that the world is facing today?
First of all, I think we have to go back to the idea itself of establishing the FOCAC. The cooperation and the relations between China and Africa goes back to many years ago. The FOCAC was only established in 2000. But the importance of the FOCAC is that it is a sort of a mechanism that governs the relations between China and Africa in order to make it more useful, more interactive, because every 3 years this mechanism meets. Every 3 years, not only 3 years, but in between we have meetings for the senior officials, we have meetings for the ambassadors in Beijing, for instance, and we have a conference, ministerial conference. So as such, it is a forum that helps us to deal with many issues relating bilateral issues between China and Africa per se. And the good thing is that our vision and our concerns with China are convergent.
And one sub-event under the FOCAC is the China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, which contributed to a very considerable trade portfolio of $282 billion last year. And Kenya, for example, has become Africa's largest flower exporter to China. So how important are these sub-forums or events on the sidelines in trying to implement the vision of the FOCAC?
As you remember that during the FOCAC of Dakar FOCAC in 2021, which was held in Dakar, Senegal, it was agreed that the share of African trade with China should be raised over the coming 3 years, that is from 21 to 24, up to $300 billion. I think we are approaching that figure. During these 3 years, we managed to cross a lot of grounds with regard to the exportation of our products to China. You made the example of Kenya's flowers, for instance, and also the avocados is one of the very important products in Kenya, and it was now in the Chinese market. The coffee, not only from Ethiopia, it is from Rwanda as well. Uganda is also looking for the market, and also I think e-commerce has helped in this regard, because it gives the Chinese importers the chance to know what is going on in Africa and what is produced in Africa, and the standardization of the production in Africa.
What are some of the initiatives that have already been in place to, take care of the different development needs of individual countries in Africa?
And one of these biggest issues now we are already implementing is the Africa Free Trade Area. If we want to promote trade, we need to promote an intra-Africa trade first of all. And in order to promote intra-Africa trade, we need assistance from China in areas where industrialization and financing, infrastructure, all those areas are very important for the multilateral. China is doing a lot in different African countries. If we take, for instance, the infrastructure over the last 20 years, it is estimated that 10,000 kilometers of railways, and we have 100,000 kilometers of roads built by China in Africa. So a lot is done through this FOCAC mechanism and through the Belt and Road, both of them.
Right, and now dozens of major cooperation documents and development agenda have been set in place to try to help African countries and China. Now there's a lot of focus and emphasis on industrialization of Africa and agricultural modernization. How have that concern being addressed, and how has China contributed along the way?
We in Africa, we believe that one of the problems that African economies face is the exportation of raw material. we don't have added value to our products. So this could not happen without industrialization, to add value to our products. And this will raise definitely our economies. With regard to China, if you remember last year, His Excellency Xi Jinping in Johannesburg declared that China will help Africa in three areas. One of them is industrialization, agricultural modernization, and talent or capacity building. These are three areas are well connected. I mean, you cannot talk about industrialization in Africa specifically, as the agriculture is the locomotive of industry in Africa. So if we merge the two together, I think we could do better. This will add value to our products, and this will also improve the living conditions of our people. It will give more jobs for our people, and this will raise also the GDP of most of our countries.
Well, you mentioned talent development. That's certainly crucial for any society to grow. And right now, more than 60% of Africa's population are under 25 years old. So that certainly represents huge development opportunities. How have African countries been doing in trying to nurture these talent and train their future growth? And how has China helped along the way?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges for Africa, because as you said, that this is the majority of the population, 60% are youth, and all these, they look for jobs. And we have to create jobs. And the industrialization is one of the areas where we would like to see how we can provide them. But if you have industrialization without having talented people to lead this industrialization or even agriculture, it's been very difficult to achieve the goals. So this is why with China we have many projects in order to improve, in order to offer more opportunities for the training of. Now we have thousands of African students studying in China, and we have also these Luban workshops, which were now in many African countries, and would like to expand on this. And I think it is highly important, and we recognize that we have to do a lot on the talent in order to promote our population capacities, and this was the only way to achieve the goals of even the 2063 agenda.
Well, China is the largest developing country, and Africa has the largest number of developing countries. So what are some of the future areas of cooperation you think the two sides could work on very closely to collaboratively address the challenges that the world is facing today?
We need to cooperate on all areas. Climate change is an issue now. Although Africa is not contributing to the damages of the climate change, but we are suffering from the impact of the climate change. But we are working on that, and we have specific plans for how to combat the climate change. So one of the most important issues is the reform of the Security Council, for instance, or the United Nations system as such, and the global financial system. This is the most serious problem which we are facing in Africa. That is, we feel that the global financial system is not in our favor at all. And this is not something new for the developing countries. We are calling for the new economic international order since the 70s, but nobody have listened to us. But still now the situation is more aggravated, and we are looking forward. And China, we are discussing this issue also with China, and we are hoping that together we could do more in this regard.
Ambassador Osman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're watching CGTN. This is our special coverage on the summit of FOCAC 2024 in Beijing. The opening ceremony is underway at the Great Hall of the People in the Chinese capital. Chinese President Xi Jinping is now delivering a speech at the ceremony. In that speech earlier, he proposed the elevation of ties between China and all the African countries China has diplomatic ties with to a strategic level. And regarding the overall positioning of China-Africa ties, President Xi Jinping proposed that it to be elevated to an all-weather China-Africa community of shared future in the new era. And we'll keep you updated on this. Now, for more insight, let's talk to our studio guests. So, Ms. Ryder, what's your reading into President Xi Jinping's latest proposal on the elevation of ties?
Well, I think it reflects the growing importance of the African continent in China's overall strategic thinking. Definitely increasing economic ties will be important, but in order for the economic ties to increase, you do need the political ties to also work well. So I think that is obviously a key part of it. And I think reflecting also on the fact that we have so many leaders here, I think it's a record number of African leaders in China for a FOCAC. So that I think also reflects on just how, Chinese president saying, well, yeah, thank you for coming, and we hope that this will be something that we can build on.
Well, what's your reading into this?
I think elevation to a strategic level means that in China's foreign policy, Africa is going to be increasingly important. And also I think in international political area, I think, the importance of China-Africa cooperation is probably emphasized a lot more. I think the word strategic doesn't come without a meaning. It does mean that the importance of Africa to China in overall China's foreign policy. I think it's built on a strategic economic relationship as well as a strategic political relationship, in my view. So I think at an occasion like this, to announce something of this significance speaks volume about how important China-Africa relationship is, meaning to China as well as to African countries.
Ms. Ryder, would you say this is also a reflection of the reality of political trust between China and African continents and the continent, African countries and the continent as a whole? Because earlier you two both emphasized the importance of political consensus and the political will to guide the future of this cooperation.
Yeah, sure. If you look at any of the leaders, African leader statements that have been, that are here in China, they've been on, CGTN and elsewhere talking about the relationship with China, they're all extremely complimentary of it, but also in particular talking about that sort of equal, that respect behind it, and the listening, demand-driven, etc. So I think that that is something that this reflects. But again, it is. We were talking about a shared future earlier. It's that confluence of interest, the mutual, the interest from the African side in China and the interest from the Chinese side in Africa. See where the links can just grow stronger.
So in this, yes, Professor, you have.
Yeah, no, I just want to make a correction. I mean, we keep talking about Africa continent, but Africa is more than just about Africa continent. There's Madagascar, there's Comoros, there's Mauritius, there's Chelsea. Yes. So these are also very important countries, part of Africa. Whole of Africa, yeah. As a matter of fact, I think I read the news just 2 days ago. They opened a direct flight between Chengdu and Chelsea. So that's a great flight for people from China to visit that great touristy location on the Indian Ocean. Yeah. So what is your question?
No, we're still talking about your readings into the proposals of President Xi Jinping. And since you mentioned this direct flight, I went to Nairobi earlier this year, and it came to my knowledge that there is also a direct flight from Changsha to Nairobi, right? Yeah. But when I was there, many people are talking about more direct flights are needed. And I also noticed that in Africa's vision for 2063, air transport network, a continental, Africa as a whole, if you will, is also included. So what would you make of this kind of connectivity? Because it's not essentially only about China-Africa, right? Because the coordination of direct flights usually has to go on a long process, and sometimes it's transcontinental.
That's right, yeah. So we know that the African continent, whether it comes to air travel, rail travel, all sorts of transport, even numbers of ports and the size of ports, we're really behind the rest of the world. And so we're looking to increase those. And again, that will open up our economic opportunities, such as trade and so on. You need, in order to get fresh fresh fruits, for example, into other countries, you need to have a cold chain. You need to have a quick cold chain. So those sorts of logistics and so on are also helped. But again, you know, tourism, people-to-people exchanges, those don't happen without good logistics and good air transport. So the more that these that we have investments in airports as well as into direct flights, we have a number of African airlines that already operate and come to China. Ethiopian Airlines, I think, is the one which has been in operation the longest, I think since 1974, flying into China, and now has 5 different destinations. But there's others like Kenya Airways, KQ we call it, who are looking to do even more, and also from West Africa as well. And we've even seen some of the Chinese funds, like China Africa Development Fund, invest in some of the African airlines. There was one from Ghana that was an investment a few years ago to help them expand their routes across the continent, not specifically into China. But again, there's just so many opportunities. And again, it's a perspective of like, well, do we think these are good projects? Do you think these are viable? And of course, from the African side, we're always saying these are viable. We have so many ideas and new things that we want to put forward, and we hope that, and we look to China as well for making those reality.
I think we all agree that connectivity is so crucial in an economically globalized world. But many visionary statesmen have been talking about the uncertainty the world is facing, and I'm afraid that that uncertainty may be deepening in the near future, as we've all witnessed in recent years. Geopolitics, conflicts, fluctuation of commodities and world economies. So sometimes connectivity gets disrupted, and countries can be victimized to this uncertainty, the whole world included. It's not only about Africa, it's not only about China. So in this context, what do you make of the significance of cooperation and joint efforts among the global south?
Well, to your point, I just give you one example. You know, there's a report from the Pentagon, for example, talking about the network of Chinese-controlled ports around the world, like 90-some ports around the world, and they, you know, frame this under a geopolitical agenda.
It's quite intriguing, right? When it comes to Chinese, it's kind of the use of words controlled, because in reality it's just a joint venture or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how many ports in Africa that have been built sort of with help from China, with some loans from China, and you know, some of these ports facilities were put into a frame under the geopolitical context, as if China is trying to control that part of the world. Totally nonsense in my view, right? I mean, it is all about building an infrastructure so as to facilitate trade. You know, it's beneficial to both sides, and this is something that we do not holding a gun against people's will, right? I mean, we do this based on mutual understanding, based on free market negotiations, something that both sides willingly enter into, right? So, you know, so this kind of a thing is totally nonsense to me. Another thing I want to point out is that, you know, across Africa, we have a lot of Chinese business people and companies entering into Africa. Now, this is also sort of put into the context of conspiracy theory, saying, wow, this is falling into China's orbit. I mean, that's the word they say, China's orbit, Chinese orbit, okay? You know, again, you know, it's totally nonsensical to me, because again, this is driven by you know, mutual benefits. You know, I think the country welcomes business from China, and you know, there's people looking for these kind of business opportunities. I think, you know, there's a big distinction between the big Western companies that do business. They don't want to go to Africa, right? But you know, we have so many business people, right, go to Africa, even go to, I think, some remote rural communities, right, and try to do a business. I think, you know, this speaks volume about the relationship between the people, and also I think the Chinese people's industrial as well as entrepreneurial spirit in terms of finding business opportunities, economic opportunities.
And the spirit is also the same to the African people, as you just mentioned. New ideas and the urgency to put them into action, right?
Yeah, well, there's actually a very large African people community in Guangzhou, right? I mean, they have a lot of people living there.
Yeah. We'll continue this right after this coverage. And earlier we spoke to David Mouillet, Director of the Center for China-Africa Studies, a Johannesburg-based think tank, for some insight on the new field of cooperation between China and Africa.
I think what China has done for the African continent in terms of advantages of trade, investments, and political linkages, I think it has gone between the two parties. What it has done is to attract other partners, seeing a prospering Africa and China, the United States, the European Union, your Japan, and more Latin American countries are also coming in. And lately, we are also seeing Gulf states coming in. And therefore, I think China was the pathfinder, has opened this and really allow Africa to engage the world comprehensively. This platform, the exchange between the two, it's getting much more stronger with a stronger global South approach, dealing with some of outstanding issues that African countries have been facing since independence.
What is your outlook in terms of new directions for the China-Africa cooperation?
I'd like to consider this sitting in Beijing from the 4th to the 6th of September, looking at what I consider as a new forms of solidarity, going beyond just infrastructure, such as the new quality productive forces, science and technology, dealing with issues of climate. And I think Africans are really looking at China for technology transfer, concretely increase the number of students to learn skills, improve human capital on the African continent, and also deal with peace and security, which are core to development of the continent.
In his speech at the opening ceremony of the FOCAC Summit 2024, Chinese President Xi Jinping has proposed to elevate relations with all African countries that have established diplomatic ties with China to the level of strategic relations and elevate the overall positioning of China-Africa relations to an all-weather China-Africa community of a shared future in the new era. And we'll keep you updated on the 2024 FOCAC Summit in Beijing. So for more insight, let's talk to our guests. So earlier, Ms. Ryder, we were talking about the significance of these proposals from Chinese President Xi Jinping in the context of global South cooperation in a world facing a mounting uncertainty.
Yeah, I think a lot of the understanding of what do these types of agreements, strategic, cooperation, all-weather, etc. The language can be very confusing to a lot of Africans, you know. But I think one of the key aspects to realize is that there are obviously certain levels of partnership, and once they are brought into place, they open up new opportunities for partnership and beyond certain economic goals, for example. But they also mean, I think, a more stronger and closer relationship between the leaders of those countries, and also more opportunities economically. So the all-weather, I think, is a really interesting aspect of it, because again, there's not many countries that China has partnerships with which are all-weather. So to overall elevate to that level, I think there's one African country, Ethiopia, that has the all-weather relations at the moment, and only maybe 4 others across the world. So this means that from the Chinese perspective, there is something about the African continent that really there's such a significant interest and such a significant focus for the future. And I think that's a key opportunity. It's a signal to African countries that we should be working more closely with China, that we should be trying to get even more out of that relationship and be able to position ourselves in a much better way going forwards globally.
And we'll be getting back to you on this. Now, Guangzhou is the capital of southern China's Guangdong province and China's third largest city. It's also home to a thriving African community. For one man, the city offers the perfect blend of economic partnership and cultural exchange. Our correspondent Robert Nagila has the story.
It's early morning and 30-year-old Justice Kwandama, a Tanzanian national living in China, is already at his warehouse near Guangzhou to prepare his next shipment to Africa. Justice runs a logistics company offering shipping solutions for goods from China to destinations across Africa.
Most of our customers come and they cannot afford to buy or ship a full container by themselves. So we help them to consolidate in small parts, and we consolidate in one container, send back to Africa.
He first came to China in 2018 to study Chinese. He established the business 2 years later after realizing the logistical challenges small African traders face. The shipments are mainly made up of clothes purchased by traders from one of the largest markets in Guangzhou. And it's here at the Yulong market that Justice gets his goods for exports. And here he is. Justice?
Hey, how are you, brother?
Not too bad. So tell us a bit about your business.
So I consolidate goods for Tanzania people and all other Africa. So I'm here to look for the customers.
The market is always crowded with African traders looking to replenish their stock back home. They then rely on Justice and others to ship their goods for them. There are more than 1,500 shops at the Yulong Fashion Plaza selling everything from modern clothes to traditional African wear for men, women and children. The market's project manager says the clothes manufactured in China cater for all types of African fashion.
East Africa and the South Africa and the West Africa. You can see all of them is the quite styles for them, yeah?
Early this year, Justice decided to venture into the restaurant business. Why an East African restaurant in Guangzhou?
We've been having other countries' restaurants, Arabs restaurants, Turkish restaurants, West African, a lot of West African restaurants. So we East African people, we have our own dishes, we have our own recipes.
And so, Chamois Restaurant was born.
When you eat your country food and you're in a foreign country, it feels home.
His customers agree.
In terms of food, I don't miss home because here I'm in home.
Local Chinese nationals are among his regular customers, demonstrating how African and Chinese people coexist in harmony, not only in business, but also while sharing their culture. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Guangzhou, China.
Now, still focusing on Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech at the opening ceremony of the 2024 FOCAC summit. In that speech, the Chinese president proposed 10 partnership actions in modernization to deepen China-Africa cooperation. So it will mainly focus on 10 areas. First is cultural and civilizational exchanges. Second is on trade. The third is on supply and industrial chain cooperation. The fourth, connectivity. The fifth, cooperation on development. The sixth, healthcare. The seventh, agriculture and livelihood. The eighth, people-to-people exchanges. The ninth, green development, and the 10th is focusing on security, and we'll keep you updated on that. Now, for more insight, let's talk to our guest. So China said it's willing to start these 10 partnership actions. Ms. Ryder, do you think it's a comprehensive one? That's for sure, but do you think it also reflects the joint voices of the two sides, both as important members of the Global South?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen, every FOCAC, there's usually some sort of means of organizing how to think about the next 3 years of cooperation. With 10 partnership areas, last FOCAC we had 9. And so I think, again, it will reflect, some of these are obviously continued themes. But again, we have to look at the detail in order to see exactly what's underneath each one. But it gives us an understanding of the prioritization of particular areas and issues. It was interesting to see supply chain cooperation as one of the new areas. I think that's different from previously. Also, peace and security was introduced as an area in 2021, so it's good to see that continue. And again, green development has increasingly risen up the agenda. In 2021, we had the climate change declaration, and so, again, reflecting the importance of that area for cooperation. And as we were talking about it earlier around the cooperation on solar panels, electric vehicles, batteries, etc. So I think that's going to be, and renewable energy is going to be a really new, interesting area for increased cooperation.
Yeah, right. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has just delivered his full speech at the opening ceremony of the 2024 FOCAC summit, still going deep on this proposed 10 partnership actions. This time, talking about prioritizing tasks, and this time the exchanges on culture and civilization came first. What's your reading into this?
Well, before even talking about this, I want to emphasize this point. I think the words "all weather" means a lot. I think the phrase "all weather."
The elevation of overall positioning of China-Africa ties,
right? China-African community of shared future is all weather. Well, the phrase "all weather" means that we are entitled to get into security area cooperation areas, and I think this is actually very significant. The 10 things you just mentioned, the last one is indeed security cooperation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I think this means a lot. I think today China makes the largest contribution to the United Nations peacekeeping force, and I think still the African continent has some battles going on, and there's still some areas that are countries that still don't have peace, and we all know the importance of peace for development. So I think China is willing to make contribution in that area, and I think the idea of all weather relationship between the two sides points to a direction of cooperation that is in a security area. Usually, when two countries have cooperation relationships in security area, that means very close relationship, right? For example, China-Pakistan.
Deep trust.
China-Pakistan, we're all weather, have an all weather relationship, and that means that is close cooperation in security areas. I think so. This is actually a very, very significant development in my view.
Since you mentioned some thorny issues faced by Africa's security for one, and this time still going back to the proposed 10 partnership actions, one of them is about healthcare. What's your reading into this?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think Africa overall lacks adequate medical infrastructure for many countries over there, and I think this is certainly one area that China can contribute a lot. I mean, we build hospitals there, we export medical devices there, and I think China certainly can share our experience with our African friends about affordable healthcare. So I think historically, going back to the 1970s, China started to send those medical teams to help foreign countries in Africa, to develop this kind of capabilities. I remember in the 1970s when China helped Tanzania to build the Tanzara, and it's a very difficult terrain, and our staff there, run into medical problems. We started to send medical teams over there to, essentially to provide medical services to a lot of people there. As a matter of fact, I also want to point to one interesting historical fact. China's Nobel laureate, Miss
Tu Youyou.
Right. He developed this. She developed this malaria curing medicine, which I think makes a huge difference in Africa, right? Yeah, so I think...
And to the whole world.
And to the whole world, of course, yeah. So, I mean, malaria is most prominent in African areas. So I think that it's a huge contribution to the continent, and we certainly would like to see things like that keep happening in the future.
Right, let's get more updates on this. China-Africa cooperation has boosted continent's infrastructure, agriculture, trade and investment. One of these collaborative efforts is evident in Nigeria. As the world's largest cassava producer, the West African country is leveraging the crop as a new driver of food security and economic growth. Cassava's versatility from food products to industrial products continues to gain traction, making it a vital resource. Yet, small-scale farmers still are challenged by low yields. A partnership with China is now working to change that. Kelechi Amikalam reports.
Alex Ezra was once reluctant to invest in cassava farming due to its poor yields. Starting with a modest backyard plot, his perspective changed after receiving training and access to better seeds. Today, he operates on a much larger scale, benefiting from a steady market demand.
Marketing the cassava product has not been a challenge at all, because cassava is a multi-dimensional product. People need it for so many things. They process it into so many things. So we already have marketers on ground.
In 2021, Nigeria's cassava output exceeded 63 million metric tons, accounting for about a fifth of global production. However, despite this volume, yields in Asia remain superior, thanks to advanced seeds and farming methods.
To get the potential of the crop in terms of yield, you also have to plant healthy seed. However, in production and availability of this seed, there is a need for a very good seed system.
The China-Nigeria partnership, spearheaded by the Nigeria Roots Crop Research Institute and the Chinese Academy of Tropical Agricultural Sciences, is designed to boost Nigeria's cassava yields. With a demonstration farm and a cassava lab in progress, the initiative aims to teach farmers how to produce more with fewer resources.
This collaboration is it has launched us into a new chapter where we'll be able to exchange better seeds or improved germplasm. We've also been able to identify and lay the foundation stone for the joint laboratory for the NRCRI Qatar's Cassava Joint Lab. We now need the support of both the Chinese government and the Nigerian government and other development partners to support the project so that the project can really kick off and begin to do what we have planned to do.
The China-Nigeria collaboration represents more than just an agricultural boost. It's a strategic move to elevate Nigeria's position in the global cassava market. The success of this initiative could mean not only increased yields, but also a significant rise in export revenues, which could transform the economic landscape for rural farmers across the country. Dubbed green gold, cassava is prized for both its nutritional value and its industrial applications. From flour and starch to ethanol, its byproducts are in high demand, particularly in the export market. Obstacles like land scarcity, inadequate mechanization, and limited financing still stand in the way of maximizing production.
The government should see it as a national challenge to see how we can clear more lands, most especially in the north where we have vast land. Cassava can do better in the north for industrial purposes and then in the south for domestic purposes.
For many farmers, the China-Nigeria partnership offers a beacon of hope, a chance to enhance livelihoods, strengthen food security, and propel Nigeria's economic growth. With stakeholders confident in the collaboration's future, the NRCRI Qatar's project is expected to gain significant traction by 2025. Kelechi Amikalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Still on agriculture, a Chinese hybrid grass known as Jingtao, literally mushroom grass, is providing an economical and environmentally friendly path towards poverty alleviation of 4 African countries. Rwandan farmer Leonidas Mushimimina says the technology has made a big impact on his community. His company focuses on mushroom cultivation and covers the entire value chain, serving both local and regional markets.
Serious? Yes.
Hello? Naze ku kazi we naze. Atagiye akaza mukamukokera. Before starting the mushroom, I don't have anything.
This is quite a simple technique because you don't need to invest much.
If you press the tube is too broken, that means it's this tube is the material is the old, it's the finish.
To gain more knowledge, I started consulting Chinese experts in this field.
Rwanda has a huge population but less land. The poverty rate stands at 37%. Lack of food and malnutrition are long-term challenges facing the country. The biggest highlight of the Juntao technology is replacing timber with grass for mushroom growing. More importantly, it reduces annual tree clearing.
Mushroom can solve the problem of malnutrition, reduce poverty, and create more jobs. After multiple visits, I decided to bring this technology back to my country. Now Rwandan people know the value of mushrooms. Unlike before, they consume a large amount of mushrooms now. And the mushrooms produced cannot even meet the market demand. We have an association that includes 30 companies and 21 cooperatives. A total of 5,000 people now grew mushrooms.
DR Congo needs a lot of mushrooms, so I will buy them here. I can sell about 100 to 200 kilograms of mushrooms per day. People's need for mushrooms is still growing, but the market supply cannot meet demand. My 2 kids went to the best private schools. Juntao technology made this happen. They both got good grades.
Some kids study at the school that I founded. We have beautiful houses, cars, and factories. In addition, I provide training for young people in my village. They find jobs this way. I'm happy for them because they are developing better than me.
By the end of 2023, China has built 24 agriculture technology demonstration centers in Africa. It has led to an average increase of 30% to 60% in crop production in those areas.
In this planting area, the total output used to be 900 kilograms for the local rice breed we used before. But with hybrid rice, the total output can reach 2 tons. I feel happy when I see the paddy during reaping season. This makes me proud. I always want to tell other farmers, come and see our paddy. Hybrid rice can reduce our poverty.
The Chinese greenhouse technology was the first one to be adopted here for small-scale growing of vegetables. People are excited about them because it was simple and very effective.
In the past decade, China has sent more than 2,000 agricultural experts and technicians to more than 70 countries and regions to promote and demonstrate more than 1,500 agriculture technologies to advance rural poverty reduction.
The essence of China-African relations is to utilize China's development to support Africa's development and ultimately deliver common development through mutually beneficial cooperation.
You're watching CGTN. This is our special coverage on the 2024 FOCAC summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered a speech at the opening ceremony at Great Hall of the People in the Chinese capital. In that speech, talking about modernization, President Xi Jinping said on the path to modernization, no single country should be left behind. He also suggested that China-Africa could join hands to set off a modernization wave in the global south. So he also described what exactly the modernization is about. It should be just and fair, open and win-win, and it should be focused on people first, and it should be inclusive, it should be environmentally friendly, and it should be a modernization of peace and security. Now, for more insight, let's talk to our guest. So, modernization, as we mentioned at the start of this special coverage, is in highlight this time. And from Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech, maybe we can get a clear understanding of this word, this path to both China and Africa, and even the larger global south, right, Professor?
First, let me comment on his statement that no country should be left behind. But I think there's indeed one country in Africa that we don't have a diplomatic relationship with. I'm not sure what the leader of that country thinks about this moment. Some 50 head of states in Africa convening in Beijing.
Again, as we also talked about, it's not about them and us mentality, right? It's about the whole world.
I just want to point out this
yes,
fact.
Of course. Yes, of
Second,
course.
I think he used a couple of adjectives to describe modernization. I think things like people first, inclusive modernization really fits the theme that he's been holding dear to his heart. Even when we talk about development in China, that's here we call it people-centered development, and this is something that President Xi has been emphasizing time after time. And I think in the African context, of course, I think development and modernization should be people first and should be inclusive. And it should benefit not just the select few, but the mass population in general. I think that's extremely important. I think the win-win adjective is also quite important because we're talking about Africa and China relationship. It's not a one-way street. It's, both sides have to benefit from that, and so that's why he used the phrase win-win. And other things like just and fair and open. And then also, quite important, as well as environmentally friendly, of course, that's just something that that we've always been emphasizing. So I think overall, these aspects are important areas that policymakers need to take into consideration when it comes to a development agenda, a modernization agenda.
What's your reading into this, Ms. Ryder? Do you think it's kind of a reflection of consensus from both China and Africa?
Yeah, I think there is. If we look at the phrase about not being left behind, and I think here in this context, it's no country left behind. That speaks very much to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Mm-hmm. That was also part of the kind of overall shaping of the Sustainable Development Goals. We know obviously. There's the Global Development Initiative that China has, and it has that sort of purpose behind it. But it's also about the importance of countries and importance of governments. Like governments shape what people do and what people can do, and they shape economies. So I think that's also important to take into account here. That's also a very, I guess, the Chinese perspective, but also in many cases an African perspective. Who, many leaders are trying to be kind of more state-led development or this sort of thing, which I think is quite interesting. I would also say the 6 modernizations in terms of African priorities, we had something called the Nairobi Declaration in 2023, which was agreed in Nairobi, of course, but it was the African leaders coming together for the first time for the climate summit, and in there they talked about a just transition, but they also talked about their aspirations in terms of environmental goals, and so we want to modernize in an environmentally friendly way. We know other countries didn't do so. Even China itself had to do a lot of cleanup. And that doesn't have to be the case anymore. So the commitment in terms of that is also is respecting the kind of priorities of African countries. Of course, we want to be able to use the natural resources that we have, fossil fuels, etc. But at the same time, we would like to if we can, and if it's cheap enough, to be able to also modernize in an environmentally friendly way.
And guess we'll be getting back to you on this. Parliamentarian leaders from across Africa are embracing new ground in the field of agriculture. They visited a high-tech agricultural zone in northern China's Shanxi province. Feng Yilei has their story on how cutting-edge technologies could potentially transform farming back in their home countries.
In Shanxi's Jingzhong zone, it's not just crops that are growing, it's new possibilities also. Parliamentarians from different African nations are getting a taste of China's recipe for modern farming success. From smart irrigation systems and automated greenhouses to the latest crop genetics, experts say a smorgasbord of innovation holds significant potential for African countries grappling with food insecurity.
You've got large-scale automation of your agriculture industry, but also heavily involved in research and development. So this is where we can benefit and mutually cooperate. So we need to see how during the dry season you can still produce the same crops that you would produce in the rainy season.
I believe these new varieties and technologies, such as our drought-resistant organic crops and our water-saving techniques, have great potential in developing countries, especially in Africa. We are eager to share these innovations without reservation.
After decades of determined efforts, China has successfully addressed the issue of feeding its massive population and deeply understand the fight against hunger in Africa. Recently, the cooperation between China and African countries has borne fruit, which is expected to also enrich the grain bags and the vegetable baskets of African people. The visit is also opening doors for potential collaborations in agricultural research and education.
China provides Somalia with scholarships. Some Somali students are coming to China and learning agriculture and technologies, and this can be replicated back to Somalia. Somalia has fertile ground and land for agriculture, so that we will build partnership relations with China in these areas in the future time.
The state-of-the-art facility and exchange of ideas has left these leaders hungry for more. At the upcoming summit on China-African Cooperation Forum, the parliamentarians say they expect deeper collaboration in related sectors.
Look at what we have been seeing there, your tomatoes producing, tomato juice. From the tomato juice, you can get something. So I see a value chain industries here. It aligned to what at home our president has been preaching, to say out of the different products, let's just find the value chains out of those products so that we can grow our economy as a country.
I think generally the whole plan is to have a structure where you can continue that cooperation and the farmers can also do it on their own rather than rely on the government for the contacts.
When these African lawmakers head home, they are expected to be armed with high-tech solutions and budding partnerships that could revolutionize farming, sowing seeds for a bumper crop in future. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Taiyuan, Shanxi Province.
Green cooperation is one of the most highly anticipated topics at the 2024 FOCAC summit in Beijing. China has signed 19 South-to-South cooperation memorandums of understanding on climate change with 17 African countries. The Ecological Environment Department of 7 African countries have joined the Belt and Road Initiative International Green Development Coalition. These agreements have laid a solid foundation for green win-win cooperation. Since 2021, China has participated in the construction of more than 120 African climate projects, including wind farms, hydropower stations, and photovoltaic power stations. In addition, China has trained over 1,500 students from African countries in areas such as environmental management, pollution control, green economy, and climate change under the Green Silk Road Envoys Program and China-Africa Green Innovation Program. The training has underpinned African countries' capacity in green development. Staying with the topic, Uganda is gradually increasing its production of renewable energy. The energy development ambitions have seen the East African country partner with Chinese enterprises in construction of clean energy sources. One of them, the 600 megawatt Karuma hydropower dam, is expected to bolster the country's electricity supply by almost 40%. Leon Siange has more.
Along the Nile River in northern Uganda lies the country's latest power generating installation. Construction of the Karuma hydropower station started in 2013 and obtained its project completion certificate this year.
It's also the biggest hydropower station in Uganda. When we came in 2013, and it's generally, we all understand that Uganda is a developing country, and especially in the hydropower area. So after its completion, it will add almost 40% of the power capability.
The power plant cost an estimated $1.7 billion. 85% of that was financed by the Export-Import Bank of China, 15% by the Ugandan government.
China's financing focuses on how to better the technical mechanism to ensure the project's own sustainability and their intended socio-economic benefits for upgrading local industries and improving people's livelihoods.
The financial boost has got the station up and running. And this is where the power is generated, 600 megawatts that can be added to the national grid. That is expected to considerably rise Uganda's generation capacity. Uganda has an installed hydropower capacity of 1,510 megawatts. The government says that the potential increase to 2,000 megawatts will be critical in meeting the country's increasing demand for electricity.
People are yearning. They have maize mills, coffee factories. Power is either not there or it's not enough. And they are using diesel generators, and yet we want clean energy.
The Karuma hydropower station is one of the models of cooperation between China and Uganda in the energy sector. And with the Uganda government planning to scale up access and distribution of power to neighboring countries, progressive collaboration has shown promise for more energy infrastructure. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Karuma, northern Uganda.
Well, dear guests, talking about energy, I think it's fair to say that it's the precondition to talk about any meaningful industrialization and eventually modernization. Energy, whether it's traditional or new. First, tell us the need and potential for energy development on the continent, Ms. Ryder.
Yeah, absolutely. So African countries, the vast majority, over 90%, have a climate change, renewable energy type plan. 75% of African countries have some sort of renewable energy target. So you can tell that renewable energy in particular is a major priority for African countries. And as we know, if you're thinking about residential access to energy, there's still over 600 million people who don't have access to energy. Now, we're not even thinking about industry when we're thinking about those numbers, but if you look at what's then needed to actually get the African continent to be that manufacturing powerhouse that we were talking about for Agenda 2063, you need a massive scale up of energy, and you need energy that can be used for industrial purposes. And that's the kind of thing, if you're looking at hydro, that can be used for industry because it can be consistent types of power and large amounts of power. If you're looking at geothermal energy, again, that can be used for industry. But it needs to be this kind of scale that's required, and quite often, a lot of the focus on green development is just is a distributed energy, small solar panels here and there on residents. It needs to be both support for people, but also for industry, and that's the way to achieve economic development. And again, the vast majority of African governments are trying to do both.
So. Can we say that for Africa, it's possible and feasible to jump out of this traditional path of pollution first and clean up later in industrialization and modernization? Because as you just mentioned, many countries have set up their green ambitions.
Absolutely. And while, yes, the African continent has still got a lot of fossil fuels under the ground, we've still got plenty of coal and gas, but we also are the world's largest source of renewable energy power. If you think about solar potential, wind potential, again, across the world, on the African continent, this is where that potential is highest, but we only have 2%, 1% of that potential. So there is so much that can be done on the continent using those types of natural resources as opposed to the ones under the ground. But nevertheless, what we need is, again, financial support to do that. We need to make all of these things cheaper. And again, China's a great partner for that.
So how does China fit into this green picture, green vision of Africa? And I have to mention that, Professor, years ago, China has got rid of all the coal-powered power plant projects from the Belt and Road Initiative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a very important point that the kind of electricity has to be industrial grade, sustainable supply of electricity. I think today there are technological solutions for that. For example, the combination of hydropower and solar and wind power can be very complementary. But the issue is that you need a very smart grid and coupled with storage capacity, energy storage technologies.
One fascinating nature about electricity is it cannot be stored in usual ways.
Exactly, that's the point. So storage is very important, but it boils down to cost, I think. Right? I mean, these things are. The cost of these things are coming down, and for African countries, to some extent, I had a great discussion some time ago with a few African scholars about this issue. From their perspective, today the cheapest energy is still coal, actually, right? But they think that it's totally unfair that Africa bears the cost of transitioning towards a new energy regime, even Africa hasn't really polluted the atmosphere for compared to industrialized countries. Nevertheless, I think in this debate, I think it's extremely important that I want to point this fact that Chinese companies have contributed immensely in bringing the cost down. They look at the solar power, look at the wind power, and I think potentially look at the energy storage technologies, right? So, but the problem is in that debate, China has been framed and criticized and accused for being sort of using a distortionary trade policies and flooding the world markets with cheap products. I think in this debate, the African countries should stand out and testify how important it is. Today, the solar power cost is coming down to something like 20 cents per watt, whereas in the 1970s when it was invented, it was almost $100 per watt. And look at this relentless coming down price curve and how much of a contribution Chinese companies have made. So I just hope that, in that debate, African countries can stand out and make a stance that indeed, we made tremendous contribution to make electricity affordable to a lot of people in Africa, to bring light to their lives, and potentially in energy storage area, the same thing, exactly the same thing is going to happen.
Well, let's look forward to that. Now, let's get more updates. Guests. Now, Nigeria is one of China's largest trading partners, and with its immense growth over the past 50 years, it's now worth some $20 billion. But the bond is deeper than that, with more young people in the capital enthusiastically taking up Mandarin. Ajak Mangut has the story from Abuja.
早上好。
It's not a typical school day for students at Peace Child International School in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, nor are they studying the usual subjects. This time around, they're learning Chinese. Their teacher, Apuri Ogenemaro, learned the language as a university student in Nigeria and wants more Nigerians to learn as well.
It's just a language that I love so much. It gives me passion. It just makes me happy. It's very rare to find Chinese teachers here in Nigeria. You can easily find other language teachers like French, Spanish, but Chinese language is very rare. So that's why I decided to major into it as a Chinese teacher.
Chinese is one of the 6 languages recognized by the United Nations and is spoken by more than 1 billion people. According to the popular language learning site Duolingo, more than 6 million English speakers are learning Chinese on its platform, and it's the 8th most popular language to study.
In African countries like Uganda and South Africa, Mandarin is part of the curriculum taught in schools, but that is not the case in Nigeria. The interest to learn the Chinese language is, however, growing as opportunities like this summer school open up.
Officials at this school say it's the first time they are including Mandarin in their summer school. They have previously taught French and Spanish.
So far, so good. It has been awesome. The children's response is wonderful. And we are thinking that we'll introduce it to the school curriculum.
But learning the language can be challenging.
The difficult part in learning Chinese was the characters, writing the characters, that's the hanzi. It wasn't easy because at some point I almost gave up, but then I had to push through.
The students are nonetheless happy to learn.
Are you excited to be learning the Chinese language today, and what do you love about it so far?
Yes, I like the Chinese Mandarin, and what I like about it is it's so exciting and interesting.
And would you like to teach me some of the things that your teacher has taught you today?
Okay. First thing, I've learned how to greet in Mandarin. Now, to say hello, you have to say ni hao. Then if you want to ask the person a question, you say, how are you? Ni hao ma. Then to respond, I am fine. Wo hen hao.
And they are already practicing.
I see you're writing some of the things your teacher taught you. Mind telling me what they are?
One in Mandarin is called E. It's pronounced E.
How do you pronounce 2? And 3?
San.
Repeat after me.
Parents say they want their children to learn the language for better future prospects.
I've always had this mindset to raise global children, children who will be relevant not just in Nigeria but beyond Nigeria as well. And if you look at the current global trends, particularly on the economic front, you discover that China as a country is making a lot of inroads into Africa. So my children learning Mandarin is going to be an awesome advantage.
The teachers here say the opportunities to learn the language are enormous, but they say they need support to become better as a way of encouraging more to learn and teach Chinese.
China is like one of the biggest economies in the world, and we're getting to a point whereby we can't avoid them because of their markets, and we are at another advantage. Whenever we go there to do businesses with them, the language barrier will not affect us because we can speak to them and they can respond to us. I've been able to learn this much, even though I've not traveled to China. So if I have an opportunity to go for an exchange program, communicating with the native speakers of Chinese language, it will definitely boost my knowledge in the language and it will make me better. Ni hao.
While it's still a long way to go for these students, they say they will continue to learn even after their summer classes are over. Ajak Mangut, CGTN, Abuja.
Earlier, we also talked to Askil Mawambopo, a senior journalist from Tanzania's Channel 10 TV. He shares his thoughts on the people-to-people exchanges between China and Tanzania.
All right, Zakia, thank you so much for joining us on CGTN. So in recent years, people-to-people exchanges between China and Tanzania have deepened. Can you provide us any specific examples of such exchanges?
Let me start in favor of we, the people from the media. I've seen how media relations between Tanzania and China elevated. There has been a delegation from Africa, specifically from East Africa, and specifically from Tanzania. We got Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation, we got Africa Media Group Limited, and we have Sahara Media Group Limited. The leaders of those medias, they met with the CMG, the China Media Group Limited. So to start, I may start with that because charity begins at home. So I can start with the media. Even the media relations has been elevated. Social services, I can term them into two categories. One, I mean, based on the education. So many of Tanzanians are in China studying, and of course, we've seen Chinese students who came to Tanzania to learn specifically the Swahili language. We have seen how Tanzania and China have been partnering in health services, first of all in medical equipment and medicines, and that has helped so much the Tanzanians with the health services. When you go to Tanzania nowadays, many things has changed. in terms of infrastructure. The government itself has been partnering with many of the Chinese enterprises, the Chinese companies. Of course, we have seen the exchange between the two presidents and of the people to people. And of course, those can explain more, of which, if I'm to reply to that question.
Staying with the topic, cultural exchanges between China and Uganda are seeing significant growth among young Ugandans, with some adopting Chinese clothing and even learning Chinese dance forms. The fusion of the two countries' cultures has been growing for 60 years now. Leon Siange again.
Patience Ndagire practices making Chinese tea.
Chi is 7.
She's picking up the language too.
Is 9. She is 10. Their language is unique, and the way they speak it, it's interesting. Their dressing code, the way you see this style, it's nice. Their food is nice.
Ndagire is one of many young Ugandans experiencing a cultural transition. The blending of Ugandan and Chinese cultures is quickly catching on.
We have the people called the Han people, and that's where the Chinese we are speaking, the Putonghua, what we call the Beijing dialect. It's where, okay, that's where most of the culture, that's the culture we are basically learning, because it's what is revolving around here.
The connection has caught Lin Yakwan too. She says her Chinese artistic impressions have become symbolic of the relationship.
Art brings people's heart closer. So you can say art is a bridge from our inner side, heart to heart. It's easier for people to see because what you paint is what reflects in your heart.
Relations between China and Uganda were established more than 60 years ago. The shared cultures have seen Uganda and China get even closer, and the thriving cultures have led to the two countries enjoying cordial diplomatic relations. Those relations have extended to trade and industrialization. The exchange has continuously grown.
Cultural cooperations and programs are an important part of our relationship. People-to-people exchanges enhance the understanding of each other, the culture, the values, and hence respect each other.
And with art, fashion, and dance, here the distinct bond of cultures from far are strongly weaved. Leon Sonyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
African students who have participated in a Chinese cultural development program are using what they've learned to help local farmers solve problems. The program is launched by China Agricultural University in Chuzhou County of Hebei Province, 5 hours drive from Beijing. The purpose is to train young technical talent for African countries. Among them is Ibrahim Naziru, a Nigerian who dreams big.
My name is Ibrahim Naziru. I came from Nigeria. Hello guys, where are you?
Hello.
Are you ready?
We are here.
Okay, are you ready for us to go?
We are ready. How are you today?
I'm good. And you?
We are all
Last
fine.
up, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good too.
So
okay.
last up, Miss Lee asked me to go to her field and check her field. I think the crops are attacked with the maize, the pests. Okay, let's go.
Okay. I got this opportunity to come to China and pursue my master's degree in agriculture as well under the program they called Science and Technology Backyard STB program.
Hi, 同学.
Agriculture, I can say it's my field and it's my passion. We deal with farmers, we go to the field with farmers, we teach farmers.
你好，我看一下这玉米
Okay.
咋弄了？看一下这
Yeah,
个
I can see the maize
这个
is
是
going
不
well,
是
but they are
缺
kind
肥
of
啥的？
infection, exactly, disease infection.
你怎么知道这个叶子长得好不好啊？
Yeah, because our professor has taught us, and that is where we learn how this thing is being seen. So whenever we come in contact with this, we know what kind of remedy we can apply to it.
They are very small, but you can find the starch.
Exactly, they are
exactly. So that's what I was wondering. The solution is for next year, maybe we should use phosphorus and zinc in right way.
The teaching model here in China is quite different from ours, because merely in Nigeria we only concentrate on theoretical aspects. But here in China, they incorporate both the theoretical and also practical field aspects.
这个中非的这个培养模式呢，应该是18年我们就开始在探索。想到目前为止，我们已经有70、80个非洲的同学毕业。像今年呢，我们在非洲小院的这几个同学给我们报道的效果就是非常振奋。他们种的玉米的产量是当地农民产量的3倍。原因也很简单，我们有先进的农业生产资料加先进的管理技术。咱们国家的教育应该说基本上这个阶段教育还是完全公益性的。对非洲的那就更是公益性的。
I'm working with my professor and my working on the plastic films mulching. The first thing I will do is to promote the use of plastic films, because we have the dry season and the wet season. So once rain stops, then it is good. That is where you apply these plastic films. Once I show it to our farmers, I know they will take it and they will use it.
I think I have to learn how to use this one.
Yeah, exactly, me too, because I have not used it before. Yeah. China is well known globally in terms of using advanced technologies in agricultural production. Back in our country, and most of our agricultural production is merely using human labor, because we have different agricultural challenges affecting our production. Height is almost 160, be it seeds. We have problem in terms of seed. You know, China, they have gone far in terms of seed production. So we also need that. Also in terms of use of pesticides and herbicides also, we also need that technology. And also as well, use of machineries. We also need that, because we lack that, honestly. But we measure up to this. Coming here, it is an opportunity for me, and also with the hope to have a kind of collaboration with China in the sense that we can have those machineries and also use them, teach our farmers, inculcate it into our agricultural production, and also we'll see from there, we'll see how we can move forward.
China's e-commerce industry has served as a digital bridge connecting African products with the big Chinese market. More African farmers and young people have seen their lives improve with deepening bilateral cooperation in this sector.
In 2020, I received an invitation to partake in a live streaming session to showcase and sell Rwandan coffee. Without hesitation, I said, let's do it. The results were mind-blowing. In a matter of seconds, all 2,000 bags of coffee we had prepared were completely sold out.
Wow, wow.
This experience served as a profound eye-opener for me, emphasizing the crucial role of e-commerce and live streaming, but also the immense interest of Chinese consumers in Rwandan products. In the past, Rwandan coffee was being sold to the Chinese market without value addition through traditional ways of trade. Thanks to the bilateral cooperation agreement on e-commerce that Rwanda signed with China in 2018, Rwanda products' access to the Chinese market has become much easier.
In July 2018, when Chinese President Xi Jinping paid a state visit to Rwanda, both countries' leaders witnessed the signing of bilateral cooperation agreements for the Belt and Road Initiative, including e-commerce deals.
We used to rely on businesses in local communities. But China's e-commerce helps us expand our market.
Before cooperating with this company and growing coffee, we were very poor.
It was very hard for us young people to find a job, but now this company solves this problem.
China and Africa have worked together to accelerate the development of e-commerce, bringing more tangible benefits. After cutting the intermediate steps, coffee growers in Rwanda can earn $4 more by selling 1 kilogram of coffee beans. With a population of more than 1.4 billion, Africa is embracing new opportunities brought by the digital economy.
The rapid evolution of e-commerce in China has given rise to even more innovative business practices, such as live streaming.
Today I want to introduce products from Africa. What did I bring? I have tea and toothpaste.
Thousands of Chinese people have bought quality African products through cross-border e-commerce platforms. The experiences of China's e-commerce development also sped up the development of Africa's digital economy and created a lot of jobs.
Now it is a good opportunity because I know that this is the work and this is the serious work. 2019 I was living to the house, I paying the rent 5,000. But 2022, I paying 15,000 because you see we're getting many orders, so we can deliver on time.
Looking ahead, we are committed to further deepening our cooperation with China. I'm confident that the best chapters of our collaboration are yet to unfold.
We welcome African countries aboard the express train of China's development. No one could hold back the Chinese people or the African people as we march toward rejuvenation.
You're watching CGTN. This is our special coverage on the 2024 FOCAC summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered a speech at the opening ceremony of the summit in Beijing. And for more insights, let's talk to studio guests. Guests, we've just watched a lot of stories regarding people-to-people exchanges, whether it's about Chinese people working and living in Africa and African people studying and working in China. Actually, in the partnership actions proposed by President Xi Jinping in his speech at a FOCAC summit opening, one partnership action is focusing on people-to-people exchanges, and in that, President Xi announced that China will provide 60,000 training opportunities to Africa, mainly for women and youth. And the two sides have agreed to designate year 2026 as the China-Africa year of people-to-people exchanges. What do you make of the role of people-to-people exchanges in the overall ties between China and Africa, Ms. Ryder?
Yeah, I think it has been, there's obviously been increasing amounts of exchanges. COVID-19, of course, put a bit of a brake on that with the pandemic response and social distancing. But I think the indication here is a return to more and more people-to-people exchange with African students into China and so on. And I think we had an indication of that even before this, because in the China-Africa leaders dialogue in South Africa in 2023, there was also this talk about talent development. So I think it is in line with that, and the need to continue to, for the African Union, we have a priority this year for education. So the link to education and supporting African young people is obviously crucial.
So any specific focuses or interests from the African side regarding education, or it's just a kind of overall, any given majors disciplines would be okay?
It is pretty much everything. We need more and more education overall. However, I think there's an increasing recognition that, especially if we're moving towards doing more manufacturing and employment, we need to have our people ready to be employed and ready to kind of do much more in terms of vocational activities, able to do more technical areas, engineering, etc. Those sorts of sectors will increase our productivity in a sense. So yeah, I think those will be the focus areas, but nevertheless, education for all at all levels is still a major priority.
Right, and talking about education, Professor, you're an educator yourself. You've already mentioned quite several of your students from Africa in our earlier discussions. So let's go back to the experience as a whole. How would this also be a good learning experience for you?
Oh yeah, well, I love my African students. Actually, in the past, I have about a dozen foreign students, my PhD students, and a lot of them actually are from Africa. And they're doing great in Africa right now, actually. Make a huge impact, make a huge difference. For example, I just give you one example. One of my students participated in the peace negotiation in Ethiopia between the central government and the Tigray province. Yeah, so I think makes a huge difference in that aspect. And also, it's not just, you know, I supervise my students. I also learned a lot from them. You know, we still are very close to each other. We keep good relationship with these students, including one from Kenya, who is currently serving as a principal secretary in the cabinet in Kenya. They are doing great. But in addition to the education aspect, I do want to mention one important number in President Xi's speech, which is something that the crowd in that hall are most interested in learning. That is the 360 billion RMB in total financial support through the next 3 years. That translates into $50 billion. I think this number compares to $40 billion during the Johannesburg summit about 3 years ago. This breaks down into 210 billion yuan for credit line. That's $30 billion, right? 80 billion yuan for assistance in various forms, and at least 70 billion yuan of investment in Africa by Chinese companies. So I think, you know, this numbers speak for themselves. This tells the commitment, right, that China is ready to make with our partners in Africa. I think this is really the substance of this whole speech. And I think the head of states of these 50-some countries will go back to their home very, very happy hearing these numbers.
Is it only about numbers, Ms. Ryder?
Well, it's very important to me.
Yeah, of course. But if we also have a breakdown, right? It's about credit line, yuan assistance, and of course Chinese companies in investment. Yeah, what's your reading into this?
So the numbers are very important.
Yes.
Yes, there were numbers that were also announced in the 2021 summit, also previously in 2018, etc. And it's almost like a kind of hallmark of FOCAC summits to have some kinds of announcemements around how much finance will be spent. And there's always a kind of question as to how much is it going to be? Is it going to be less? Is it going to be more? There's a kind of, especially with the Chinese economy, concerns about the Chinese economy that, you know, maybe there might be less from China. But I think what the announcements today suggest is that commitment to the African continent in terms of being able to continue to support Africa with infrastructure in particular, is still extremely strong, and that there is actually that win-win cooperation from
Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, and heads of delegation. Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellency, Mr. Moussa Faki Mohamed, Chairperson of the AU Commission. Friends and distinguished guests. Blossoms in spring, turn into fruits in the autumn, and a bumper harvest is the reward of hard work. In this season of harvest, I'm delighted to gather together with so many old and new friends in Beijing to discuss grand plans for China-Africa friendship and cooperation in the new era. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I extend a warm welcome to you all. The friendship between China and Africa transcends time and space, surmounts mountains and oceans, and passes down through generations. The founding of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in 2000 was a milestone in the history of China-Africa relations. Over the past 24 years, especially in the new era, China has advanced forward, hand in hand, with our African brothers and sisters in the spirit of sincerity, real results, amity, and good faith. We stand shoulder to shoulder with each other to firmly defend our legitimate rights and interests as once in a century changes sweep across the world. We get stronger and more resilient together by riding the tide of economic globalization, delivering tangible benefits to billions of ordinary Chinese and Africans. We share will and will in fighting natural disasters and epidemic together, creating touching stories of China-Africa friendship. We always emphasize with and support each other, setting a stellar example of a new type of international relations. Thanks to nearly 70 years of tireless efforts from both sides, the China-Africa relations is now at its best in history. With its future growth in mind, I propose that bilateral relations between China and all African countries having diplomatic ties with China be elevated to the level of strategic relations. And that the overall characterization of China-Africa relations be elevated to an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future for the new era. Friends and distinguished guests, modernization is an inalienable right of all countries, but the Western approach to it has inflicted immense sufferings on developing countries. Since the end of World War II, third world nations represented by China and Africa countries have achieved independence and development one after another, and have been endeavoring to redress the historical injustice of the modernization process. As we are about to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, we are going all out to build a great modern socialist country in all respects and pursue national rejuvenation through a Chinese path to modernization. Africa is also awakening again, and the continent is marching in solid strides toward the modernization goals set forth in the AU's Agenda 2063. China and Africa's joint pursuit of modernization will set off a wave of modernization in the global south and open a new chapter in our drive for a community with a shared future for mankind. We should jointly advance modernization that is just and equitable. In promoting modernization, we should not only follow the general rules, but also act in light of our national realities. China is ready to increase exchanges of governance experience with Africa, support all countries in exploring modernization paths befitting their national conditions, and help ensure equal rights and equal opportunities for all countries. We should jointly advance modernization that is open and win-win. Mutually beneficial cooperation is the sunny road to the betterment of long-term and fundamental interests of all countries. China is ready to deepen cooperation with Africa in industry, agriculture, infrastructure, trade and investment. Promote exemplary high-quality Belt and Road cooperation projects and build together a model for the delivery of the Global Development Initiative. We should jointly advance modernization that puts the people first. The ultimate goal of modernization is the free and full development of human beings. China will work vigorously with Africa to promote personal training, poverty reduction, and employment. Enhance the sense of gain, happiness, and security of the people in the course of modernization, and ensure that all will benefit from the process. We should jointly advance modernization featuring diversity and inclusiveness. Well-balanced material and spiritual advancement are a lofty objective of modernization. China will enhance people-to-people and cultural exchanges with Africa, champion mutual respect, inclusiveness and coexistence of different civilizations on our way to modernization, and strive together for more fruitful outcomes under the Global Civilization Initiative. We should jointly advance modernization that is eco-friendly. Green development is a hallmark of modernization in the new era. China is ready to help Africa build green growth engines, narrow the gap in energy accessibility, adhere to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and jointly push for the global transition to green and low-carbon development. We should jointly advance modernization underpinned by peace and security. Modernization would not be possible without a peaceful and stable environment for development. China is ready to help Africa improve its capacity in safeguarding peace and stability independently, prioritize Africa in implementing the Global Security Initiative, promote mutual reinforcement of high-quality development and greater security, and work together with Africa to uphold world peace and stability.
Friends and distinguished guests, China and Africa account for 1/3 of the world population. Without our modernization, there will be no global modernization. In the next 3 years, China will work with Africa to take the following 10 partnership actions for modernization to deepen China-Africa cooperation and spearhead the Global South modernization. First, the partnership action for a mutual learning among civilizations. China is ready to work with Africa to build a platform for governance experience sharing, China-African Knowledge Network for Development, and 25 centers on China and Africa studies. We will make better use of Africa's leadership academies to cultivate talents for governance and invite 1,000 members of African political parties to China to deepen exchanges of experiences in party and state governance. Second, the partnership action for trade prosperity. China will voluntarily and unilaterally open its market wider. We have decided to give all LDCs having diplomatic relations with China, including 33 countries in Africa, zero tariff treatment for 100% tariff lines. This has made China the first major developing country and the first major economy to take such a step. It will help turn China's big market into Africa's big opportunity. China will expand market access for African agricultural products, deepen cooperation with Africa in e-commerce and other areas, and also launch a China-Africa Quality Enhancement Program. We are prepared to enter into a framework agreement on economic partnership for shared development with African countries to provide long-term, stable, and predictable institutional guarantee for trade and investment between the two sides. Third, the partnership action for industry chain cooperation. China will foster industrial cooperation growth clusters with Africa, push forward the pilot zone for in-depth China-Africa economic and trade cooperation, and launch an African SMEs empowerment program. We will build with Africa a digital technology cooperation center and initiate 20 digital demonstration projects so as to embrace together the latest round of technological revolution and industry transformation. Fourth, the partnership action for connectivity. China is prepared to carry out 30 infrastructure connectivity projects in Africa, promote together high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, and put in place a China-Africa network featuring land-sea links and coordinated development. We are ready to assist in the development of the African continental free trade area and deepen logistics and financial cooperation for the benefit of trans-regional development in Africa. Fifth, the partnership action for development cooperation. China is ready to release the joint statement on deepening cooperation within the framework of the Global Development Initiative with Africa and implement 1,000 small and beautiful livelihood projects. We will replenish the China World Bank Group partnership facilities to boost Africa's development. We support Africa in hosting the 2026 Youth Olympic Games and the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. We will work together with Africa to deliver more fruits of development to the two peoples. Six, the partnership action for health. China is ready to establish with Africa a hospitals alliance and joint medical centers. We will send 2,000 medical personnel to Africa and launch 20 programs of health facilities and malaria treatment. We will encourage Chinese companies to invest in Africa's pharmaceutical production and continue to do what we can to help Africa with epidemic response. We support the development of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to strengthen public health capacity in all African countries. 7. The partnership action for agriculture and livelihoods. China will provide Africa with 1 billion RMB in emergency food assistance, build 100,000 more of standardized agriculture demonstration areas in Africa, send 500 agriculture experts, and establish a China-Africa Agriculture Science and Technological Innovation Alliance. We will implement 500 programs in Africa to promote community welfare. We will also encourage the two-way investment for new business operations by Chinese African companies, enable Africa to retain added value, and also create at least 1 million jobs for Africa. Eighth, the partnership action for people-to-people exchanges. China will implement with Africa more solidly the Future of Africa Vocational Education Cooperation Plan, establish together an engineering technology academy, and build 10 Luban workshops. We will also provide 60,000 training opportunities to Africa, mainly for women and youth. We will launch with Africa a Cultural Silk Road program, as well as an initiative of cooperation on innovation in radio, TV, and audio and visual programs. The two sides have agreed to designate 2026 as the China-Africa Year of People-to-People Exchanges. Ninth, the partnership action for green development. China is ready to launch 30 clean energy projects in Africa, put in place meteorological early warning systems, and carry out cooperation in disaster prevention, mitigation, and relief, as well as the biodiversity conservation. We will create a China-Africa Forum on peaceful use of nuclear technology, establish together 30 joint laboratories, and collaborate on satellite remote sensing and lunar and deep space exploration. All this is destined to help the green development in Africa.
10th, the partnership action for common security. China is ready to build with Africa a partnership for implementing the Global Security Initiative, or GSI, and make it a fine example of GSI cooperation. We will give Africa 1 billion RMB of grants in military assistance, provide training for 6,000 military personnel and 1,000 police and law enforcement officers from Africa, and invite 500 young African military officers to visit China. The two sides will conduct joint military exercises, training, and patrol, carry out an action for a mine-free Africa, and jointly ensure the safety of personnel and projects. To implement the 10 partnership actions. The Chinese government will provide 360 billion RMB of financial support through the next 3 years. This breaks down into 210 billion RMB of credit line, 80 billion RMB of assistance in various forms, and at least 70 billion RMB of investment in Africa by Chinese companies. In addition, China will encourage and support Africa in issuing panda bonds in China to enhance our results-oriented cooperation in all areas. Friends and distinguished guests, the Communist Party of China held in July the successful third plenary session of its 20th Central Committee, laying out systematic plans for further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. This will profoundly further transform China. It will also provide new opportunities and new driving forces for African countries and for our joint pursuit of modernization. As an African proverb goes, a friend is someone you share the path with. On the path to modernization, no one and no country should be left behind. Let us rally the more than 2.8 billion Chinese and African people into a powerful force on our shared path toward modernization. Promote modernization of the Global South with China-Africa modernization. And write a new magnificent chapter of development in human history. Let us join hands to bring about a bright future of peace, security, prosperity, and progress for our world. Thank you.
That was the keynote speech delivered by Chinese President Xi Jinping at the opening ceremony of the 2024 FOCAC summit in Beijing. President Xi Jinping has proposed to elevate relations with all African countries that have established diplomatic ties with China to the level of strategic relations and elevate the overall positioning of China-Africa relations to an all-weather China-Africa community of a shared future in the new era. President Xi also proposed 10 partnership actions in modernization in China-Africa cooperation. So, Professor Gong, what you're reading into connectivity issue addressed by President Xi Jinping in his keynote speech?
Well, I think it's a very touching moment to see such a large crowd of people from Africa listening to a Chinese leader, and for a 20-minute talk that is full of substance, full of real content, full of action items, things that can really happen. One of the things you mentioned is the connectivity issue. President Xi mentioned that China is prepared to carry out 30 infrastructure connectivity projects in Africa. That's a continuation of the Belt and Road Initiative. I think even though with almost over 10 years of infrastructure built out in Africa, and Africa still needs a lot, and I think we're going to continue down that path and build more ports and the railways and highways to facilitate better commerce, better connectivity within Africa as well as with Africa, with the rest of the world. I think this is still going to be a main theme of China-Africa cooperation, among other things, among the 10 things he mentioned.
Right, and what's your main takeaway, Ms. Ryder?
Yeah, I think also building on that, with over 50 African leaders here in Beijing, they couldn't go away with nothing. And this is obviously something significant. I think one of my main takeaways is on the Global Development Initiative, and this is Senegal's legacy, of course, as well as China's, in terms of there's going to be a new declaration on the Global Development Initiative between China and African countries. We saw other declarations at the last FOCAC, so it's going to be interesting to see this one. But what is so interesting about this is also just how President Xi framed it, of the small and beautiful projects being associated with the Global Development Initiative. And there's been speculation around, are infrastructure projects with China's cooperation just going to be the small and beautiful ones? Are they all going to be foreign direct investment? But his speech really differentiates those, and it seems that infrastructure projects will continue. We're going to have green projects, we're going to have connectivity projects, and there's also going to be the Global Development Initiative, small and beautiful projects as well, linked to livelihoods. So I think that's a key development, and I think it removes some of that speculation around the future of China-Africa cooperation for the next 3 years.
Thank you very much for your insights, Ms. Hannah Ryder and Professor John Gong there. And that's it for our special coverage on the 2024 summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening ceremony Thursday morning in Beijing. President Xi has proposed to elevate relations with all African countries that have established diplomatic ties with China to the level of strategic relations and elevate the overall positioning of China-Africa relations to an all-weather China-Africa community of a shared future in the new era. Thank you very much for watching, and CGTN will bring you more highlights in the upcoming programs throughout the day and throughout the week. I'm Pan Dong in Beijing. Stay tuned.